The romantic poetry of renewable energy. Gently turning wind turbines and some peaceful solar panels. The idea that the wind is free and the sun is free, or nearly free, or maybe better than free. And the idea is that they last forever and produce very low cost energy.
Solar panels on the roof, charging your vehicle for free overnight. That's what it looks like.
But the objective reality is actually quite different.
Absolutely destructive to the communities, destructive to the environment.
The land clearing going on is astounding.
We've got 4 dozers working at the Lotus Creek wind farm site right now, clearing the habitat of the highest density of koalas in this state.
They're putting these things on our A-grade food producing land.
This mad rush is being done in an ad hoc, random, chaotic way.
The humming noise, constantly, and it just keeps your heart going. You can't get to sleep.
I've got nothing to lose. I've already lost it.
Literally where I'm standing, 5 metres from our house, they propose to put 85 metre tall, destructive high voltage towers. That close.
So-called community consultation, which they're not.
Hadn't had any prior warning despite being a neighbour.
It's splitting the community.
They had to eventually sell out. The pressure just got too great.
You don't clear forests to fix the climate.
They don't want any regulations because they have to rush this stuff through.
Renewables are not the cheapest form of energy, they're the most expensive form of energy.
It would cost $1.2 trillion by 2032 and $5 to $7 trillion by 2060 to reach these targets.
Everyone's bills will keep going up and up and up, and the increases will be steeper and steeper and steeper.
It's a matter of standing up even though your voice shakes, because if no one does, nothing's gonna change.
I don't think a lot of it really comes down to the environment at all. In fact, I don't think any of it does.
I'm the Cabinet Minister responsible for climate change and energy, so I've got my hands on the energy levers and the climate change levers. Since we've been in power, introduced an 82% renewable energy target, up from around 30% when we came to office. So think about that, 30% when we came to office in 2022 to 82% by 2030, that's a huge lift. We don't have time, we've got a huge task ahead of us. We need to build transmission towers and everything that goes into the renewable energy supply chain. We are going really fast.
My name's Emma Bowman. I'm a mixed farmer from central west New South Wales, so we're about 8 kilometres east of Dunedoo. Within the central west Arana Renewable Energy Zone, which we are pretty much smack bang in the middle of, there's over 50 projects. Nearly 1,000 turbines proposed and over 11,000 hectares of solar. People who are signing up to host wind and solar, they have a choice, whereas the transmission lines that have to connect all of those projects together are under compulsory acquisition, so those people don't have a choice. So it's very divisive, it's very stressful, and I think that's having a huge impact on people around the area.
We got a letter in the mail informing us that we were in line to get a transmission line through our properties, that it was to be a superhighway to move power and trade power between Victoria and New South Wales and into South Australia as well. We've got a system where I propose to put this transmission line through when there's a credible alternative that has already got a transmission line route on it, down a pre-existing easement. They're even going against their own occupational health and safety regulations of avoid the risk. The risk is already known on a pre-existing easement. Why are you then creating a new easement, taking a route that has the most environmental impact when we're trying to save the environment? What is being pushed in front of communities out here at the moment is absolute lack of property right and property ownership. I've had 2 security guards sitting out on the front lawn, standing on the front lawn, while their workers were 600 metres up the road doing work. So when my child gets off the bus from school, community good is not being looked after. An energy system is being played for political gain more so than anything else. There's a rush, an unnecessary rush, to jump into an energy transition with a technology that is not up to speed, with no understanding of what it is doing to the people that are living in the area, that is actually producing the food for the country and the world, and destroying their lives and what their families have been building for years. The impact on our family has been dramatic. 4 years of actually not knowing. No. You've got kids going through school. Our eldest is in year 12 this year, so for a fair proportion of her high school years, she's been subjected to this project as part of our lives. So now she's a farming kid and wants to continue in agriculture, but does not want to do it here, right? Which is heartbreaking in itself. So, and the other 2 are young, and we try and keep them away from it as much as we can. And my wife and I, we just try and battle through.
My name's Therese Creed. I grew up in Sydney in a family of 10. I am a teacher. I'm also an author. I left Sydney on my horse and rode from Melbourne to Cooktown over 2 years, and in that time learned what life was like outside of a big city. Coming from my background in Sydney as a teacher, where I'd always been led to believe that renewable energy was safe and green and the answer to our future, we were very, very unaware at that time of threats that were going to be attached to this huge development. If I could speak to a city audience, I would say I understand you, because if I still lived in Sydney, I would be you. I would be believing this is a good thing, that these solar and wind plants are being built somewhere. I'm telling you now, from someone who's not in that setting anymore, that this is the very worst thing that has happened to our Australian landscape. And I think as city people, you deserve to be told what is happening to your A-grade food producing land.
Queensland only has 2.5% of its land mass is A-grade food producing land, and they're chasing it because the soil's soft, and so they don't have to big effort to bang all their piles in to hang their solar panels on. The most important thing for us out of this is to get people to know that their food supply is getting shortened, getting less and less. That's the biggest thing, and people think they can just keep going to Woolies and getting their food. Well, it's got to come from somewhere, and it comes from here.
We've been asking ourselves for a long time why the government has taken this direction, the net zero target, because it's such a rush. They want softer soil, they want cleared land, they don't want any regulations because they have to rush this stuff through.
Politicians today are putting more and more restrictions on us food producers, and that these renewable energy companies are exempt from the same things that we have to comply by.
If they had the same constraints on them that are put on mines and put on farmers and put on everyone else on the land, these things would not be allowed. They would not meet any of the criteria. They would be abolished immediately. So I don't think a lot of it really comes down to the environment at all. In fact, I don't think any of it does. So It's for every reason other than the environment. It's for money, it's for votes, it's for the green drive, and this new religion that's sweeping the world of saving the environment, and we're poisoning the planet in order to save the environment.
My name's Grant Piper, and we're on our property just southeast of Coolah in central New South Wales. My family's been around here since the 1840s. Two brothers came out from Ireland back in the 1840s. This is prime but red basalt grazing country, a lot of range country and some river flats for farming as well. And on the other side of the hill over there, just over 3k away, there's going to be 138 250 metre turbines overlooking us. And about 8.5 k's to the north, there's going to be another 185 turbines. In total in the Central West Arana Res, there's 54 projects, wind and solar planned, and there's over 1,000 turbines at the moment listed if they build all those, and over 9 million solar panels, plus transmission towers, substations, and everything that comes with it. They have no environmental credentials as far as reducing emissions or CO2, because the sunk costs and the sunk energy and all these things, including the power lines, far outweighs any energy they'll ever produce. And then there's the local environmental effects of destroying productive farmland. You couldn't think of a worst way to develop bulk power and do a heap of damage to the countryside and the community and relations with your neighbours. It's not a good project at all.
The land clearing going on is astounding. That ridge behind me, heavily timbered ridge behind me, will be roads and wind turbines, and it'll be filled with cement. That's boxgum woodland behind us. Boxgum woodland is vulnerable, threatened and protected. So when they take that boxgum woodland out that's hundreds of years old, you can't just plant a tree and grow it back.
When they turned the turbines on, that was probably the last time I got a full night's restful sleep. And ever since then, I've had to go away to get a decent night's sleep. I've got nothing to lose. I've already lost it. I've lost the right to enjoy my property in peace and quiet. I've lost that. I lost that the day they switched that on. And that's something that I will never get back. The ability to enjoy my property in peace and quiet without turbine noise, to get a good night's sleep, I think everyone should be entitled to do that in their own home. That's something that I've lost, and I'll never get it back. Not here. And there's even more of these turbines coming in. Doesn't really matter which direction the wind comes from, I'm going to get disturbed. I was going to say it's unfair, but it should be illegal. It should be illegal. That should not be allowed to happen. The politicians and the bureaucrats, their first order of business should be to protect the people, and they're not doing it. They're just not doing it. They don't care, and they don't care that they don't care. It's just wrong.
My closest wind tower would be 9.1 kilometres. Didn't really notice them for the first sort of 6 months to a year, and then sleep deprivation was like waking up all the time or not getting to sleep. And at the moment we're probably on about 50 to 70 nights a year where we either can't get to sleep, we could get to sleep about say 2 or 3 o'clock at night, or we get woken up at 2 or 3 o'clock and can't get back to sleep. And mainly due to the low vibration of the hum, the humming noise, constantly. So, and it just keeps your heart going, you can't get to sleep. And then talking to other people, other friends, family, live about the same distance or further, I'd say to them, how'd you go sleeping last night, like Wednesday night, Did you get woken up at 3 o'clock? How'd you know? And then we sort of all gather together, it's like, well, this is the only reason it's happening. So I raised the issue, he came out to our house, and it was pretty funny that day he came out and we stood next to our laundry door, and you could hear him clear as day. He said, where's that truck? He sort of looked around the road, and no mate, there's no truck, that's the wind towers. He said, well, you can't hear them because you're too far away. I said, no. So, yeah. So from then on, I sort of started complaining more and more, and got to a stage, he sent me an email back to say that the EPA has told us you're more than 1.8 kilometres away from the closest wind tower. Because you're more than 1.8 kilometres, you can't hear them. End of story.
I was going many nights without much more than 3 to 3.5 hours sleep. And It was sort of wearing a bit thin. Spoke to them about whether they couldn't close them down at night time so they could get a bit of sleep, and no, they couldn't do that. So we just had to live with it. So what do?
Local landowners are not being heard. Their local knowledge is not being utilised. If you go and talk to farmers and ask them what the impacts are like, I think it really brings home how much we care about our land, and we just don't want to see it being destroyed, or our businesses or livelihoods or homes being destroyed either. I fear that putting all of this large-scale renewable energy infrastructure up, it will make this area a no-fly zone for aerial firefighting. And that scares the absolute shit out of me. Because without those aerial blokes, I don't know where that fire would have ended up at Sir Ivan. 3 days it burnt 55,000 hectares. It's unfathomable where that might have ended had there not been aerial assistance. And, like I said, while the government authorities all tell us that, oh no, it's not a problem, they're not the people on the ground fighting the fires. They're not the people on the ground cleaning up the mess.
Wind turbine blades are made from BPA, and they obviously erode in the weather. People need to understand that with the erosion of blades, we will have BPA blowing in the wind all around here. So it's blowing all over my wheat, all over my canola, and all over the grass that the cattle are eating. I don't know what impact it's going to have on the grain, the oilseed and the meat. I don't know what impact it's going to have on the wildlife either.
The main thing that concerns me about wind farms up in far north Queensland is that they're putting them right in the middle of designated wildlife refugia. Where I am now and where these wind turbines are, we are at 1,000 metres or just over 1,000 metres in a eucalypt forest, and there's koalas here as well as a lot of other wildlife. It's not just the clearing of forest to get their tracks in and to put their turbines. They have a much wider impact. Their low-frequency sound travels a long way from these wind turbines. They make a lot of low-frequency sound, and that's where koalas communicate. Wind farm noise is going to interfere with that. It's going to mask the sound, distant sound of a koala calling. It's going to make it harder for koalas to find each other. It's going to put pressure on these populations to survive, and it's just the wrong place to put wind turbines. They can easily put them in degraded country. They don't have to put them in forest in refugia. This is not just koalas, this is a refugia for a lot of mammals. These are the last places where koalas will survive, and we are degrading them. We should look at the impact of low frequency sound on these koalas. We have the technology, we don't have the will.
My name is Sandra and I'm from Hawk's Nest, where my family have lived along the beach for over 100 years this year. Without any consultation, the government had decided to put 300 turbines off our beach. It was originally 10K, then it was pushed back to 20K. Across our community, well over 90% oppose them. This would disrupt our tourism, our business, our holiday making, the things that make all our community viable economically and indeed as a community. The impact that it's having on our families, on our community has been enormous. There has been absolutely no listening from this government. There has been no listening to the people who care about the birds, a species of bird that is only found in one place on the whole planet, and that is Cabbage Tree Island. No listening to the fishermen, to the people that we buy our fish and chips. They don't care about our community, they don't care about our local businesses. They just don't care. We have worked with local engineers, guys and girls that know what they're doing, know how to research. And we know that this is going to cost over $60 billion. $60 billion of destruction, to our sea, to our ocean, to our local community and businesses that will never come back. This will not deliver my community anything, no jobs, no cheaper power, and it certainly isn't going to save the planet.
It was declared without any consultation with locals. Subsequently, there has been some consultation, but we had virtually no effect on it at all. We are very concerned. Two primary reasons. One is a potential negative effect on whales and dolphins in the area, which is our life blood, and that of much of Port Stephens. It's one of our great assets, is our marine environment. And anything that threatens that, obviously, we're going to be worried about it. And when we've looked at other areas around the world where there are a few, and there's not that many of these floating turbines around the world, it's never good. And the noise that they produce in the water, the electromagnetic frequencies that go into the water. So we're concerned for the fishing, concerned for whales and dolphins. We have 25 million migratory seabirds flying up and down this coast, right in that area. So we're concerned for the environment. Building offshore turbines for here will not change the climate in the world in any way, shape or form. It might make the government, to their mind, look like they're complying with their 2030 things, but they need to consult with locals. If this was off Sydney, it would go flat. It would be a change of government because they would not accept this off Sydney. So given that we don't need that much power here in Port Stephens, maybe they should consider sticking it off Sydney. We don't need all these things. Let's get sensible, look after nature and look after our beautiful assets. Let's not compromise the environment just for something that seems like a good idea at the time.
The way that it fractured the community was a big thing for us. Most communities, I think rural communities, are pretty tight-knit and people know each other really well, but that came to an awful ending. People don't talk to each other. Maybe they do a bit more now, but I think generally it's remained fractured and probably will never recover, particularly as more of these projects come into this area.
We had another young couple who were involved with us, and they had to eventually sell out. The pressure just got too great. The mental issues they had was terrible, and yes. Same as all of us. No one cares about the mental issues of the neighbouring people.
It's something that we didn't want, we didn't ask for. Very few people wanted it, and very few people profited from it. The promise of jobs that, forever after is a myth and a pipe dream. The promise of, wealth to the community just hasn't materialised.
When I first saw the turbines, I thought, this is an amazing piece of engineering. 1 or 2 turbines, and then you see a sea of them. And the view and the country that I love when I came up here is being removed, destroyed.
Burra is very iconic with its rolling hills, and yeah, they're not beautiful rolling hills on their own anymore. We're going to have these massive towers. That's not why people come to Burra. And I'm really concerned that tourism will drop off a lot, and that's a much more sustainable future for the township as well.
They've come along, and in my late middle age, early old age, they've annihilated the capital value of my home, and they have no intention of making any fair recompense for that.
My biggest nervousness in all of this is that community being torn apart by this rubbish.
It's splitting the community, and that's not good. That's how we survive in towns like Burra. We are a community. We usually work together.
It's a small town. We rely on each other. That's what we have. We rely on each other for business and support and helping each other out in just everyday life. And that was why we moved here.
So many people are against it within the town, having conversations, but people are just too scared to voice their opinion within the community, because we've seen in other communities this causes a massive divide, and that is absolutely not what I want to happen within our township.
The companies were very sly and tricky in how they convince farmers into thinking their neighbours wanted them, and some of the shonky contracts and the way they played people against one another was pretty disgusting.
The damage is done in the community from the moment the proponents come into the area, sign people up on confidentiality agreements, and then they can't even discuss it with their neighbour, and no one really knows what's going on. There's all these rumours, and from that point forward the damage is done and the community is divided, because your trust is destroyed in your neighbour. Possibly you don't know what is happening.
Every farmer was told you couldn't talk to your neighbour about your contract. That's a confidentiality agreement.
When we spoke to the neighbours involved, they had signed confidentiality agreements, which was why we'd heard nothing up until that point. Tried to arrange meetings with the company, who eventually agreed but insisted on meeting us all individually and not as a group.
I've been involved with conservation for most of my life. And I like to think I'm fairly well tuned into what is left of our wild and remote areas. I'm generally out in these sort of places very regularly. I work as a landscape photographer. I've been coming to places like this and photographing beautiful, beautiful wild vistas and landscapes that I thought would be protected forever. So it was quite alarming to think that this place of beauty and tranquility and peace and classified remnant old growth forest was now going to be industrialised for 94 wind turbines. Turbine going in there. This is where I camp, It's a place of... I photographed a striped possum just over here. Yellow-bellied gliders just over there. And we've got a 60-metre wide haulage road being punched into this forest right here for a wind turbine. These places we're losing. And now we're going to lose them even faster for this onslaught of renewable projects. And I don't think people in the cities really understand or fathom what's going on. I think they're being hoodwinked by the renewable energy sector, by conservation groups, that this is the price we need to pay. We need to clear all this land for turbines. There was 145 kilometres of brand new haulage roads to be pushed in across all these ridge lines, across all these mountains to get these turbines in here. 1,100 cubic metres of reinforced concrete into the foundations, concrete batching plants, all through here, yet we're told this is the price we need to pay for renewables. And I've been involved with conservation groups all my life, and it was like, where have they gone? They've all gone underground. They're missing in action. It's like they're in their offices in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane telling all of us in regional Australia, oh well, it's okay, we're happy to lose all those forests now. That's the price we need to pay for climate action. We fought for all those forests in the past. We've got the Vegetation Management Act and we've got all this legislation in place to protect these forests, but that's okay. Overturn all that legislation for wind farms. They can go in there, they can bulldoze, dynamite, they'll dynamite out this ridge, push it all over the edge. All the sediment goes into the creeks. It's okay, they're exempt from the reef regulations. It's okay, they can do all that because it's climate action. This is climate action. If all these projects were to proceed, we're going to see significant habitat loss. The Upper Burdekin wind farm just next to here, the next one down, 3 red goshawks were found on that site, well 3 sightings of goshawks. And they're the holy grail of raptors in Australia. Just to the north, you've got the Caban wind farm, which is now operational. We've just had the bat and bird death figures released. and it's catastrophic. Wedge-tailed eagles, the population of wedge-tails have now gone, they've been killed. Spectacled flying foxes, well over 100 bats, but that's what they find. There's carcasses that they don't find. You know, I'm a left-leaning voter. I've been very involved with the Greens since I left school. I believe in climate change. And we're in this really bizarre situation that climate action actually requires the vast clearing of massive amounts of land to try to do what we need to do by 2030 or 2032, 2035, by 2050, 2060, these really strict targets. And to get those targets, you need to build so much infrastructure. And the green groups are just standing back and going, just do whatever it takes. Do whatever it takes. And if you look at the net zero report, to do whatever it takes means covering 7 times the spatial footprint of the state of Tasmania in glass and steel by 2060. I'll say that again, 7 times the spatial footprint of the state of Tasmania covered in glass and steel to try to get to these targets. And that's a great report written by the Princeton Institute and a well-respected report. And you go, really? And conservation groups are pushing for that? And that's what hurts the most. We're doing this because of a climate emergency, yet the antithesis of a climate emergency is clearing forests like this. You don't clear forests to fix the climate. And they just don't seem to get it. Just don't seem to get it. I've got to laugh because it's so ridiculous. I've invited the Australian Greens to come out here, to come out onto country and look at the scale of what is to be lost. They won't come out. They just won't come out. I think their fear is that they'll come along and they'll see things they don't want to see. They don't want to see this forest that's about to be cleared for a turbine because they've put so much investment into just wind and sun technology as being the fix for climate change. That's the technological fix. Yet when they see what that technology is doing, they're going, oh shit, yeah, okay. Okay, they don't know how to get out of this issue because there's other technologies that would have least impact. So I think they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And I see a lot of arrogance there, that they don't want to be exposed to the reality of renewable energies in this country. Because if they really did open their eyes up and actually read the net zero report, for example, properly, they'd go, holy shit, this is pretty bad. The scale of what is required. The scale is astronomical. Here at Caban Wind Farm, up here in North Queensland, it's really the tip of the iceberg for what's happening with this rapid rollout of renewables. And I think a lot of Australians think, oh, well, one over here, one over there, that's okay. We can actually meet our targets with that. But with my cartographic background, I've been able to map what is actually going on. And I think people aren't aware of the scale of the task at hand to achieve these targets, which are being really rushed through. Here in Queensland, we've got 4,100 turbines in the pipeline right down these high elevation refugia areas. But when we look at capacity factor, these turbines only run 25% of the time. So we need to times that by 3. So we really need 8, around 12,000 turbines like this one behind me to keep the lights on here in Queensland on a summer's night. Australia-wide, we've now mapped 20,000 kilometres or over 20,000 kilometres of brand new haulage roads like this, punched through remote areas, high-value agricultural land, refugia areas, to facilitate the construction of what we've mapped as being 21,000 turbines in Australia. So the numbers are staggering. It's a huge, huge, huge task at hand to deliver what Minister Bowen is saying we need to do. In actual fact, Minister Bowen is saying that we need to erect one of these turbines every 10 hours up until the year 2030 to reach those 2030 targets. It's off the charts. And I don't think the average hard-working Australians at home really understand the scale that is required to try to achieve these targets. The transition is being dictated to us by multinational, overseas-owned companies. They are saying where they want to go, and it's the cheapest locations. And this is a cheap location because the transmission lines are nearby, down the bottom of the mountains. So that's what's driving this. It's got nothing to do with planning, it's got nothing to do with communities, it's got nothing to do with putting in developments in places of low agricultural productivity or high biodiversity or high cultural significance.
It's not about developing power. And when you look at the people that are involved, the investors and the Twiggies and the Turnbulls and the others, it's all been set up from the get-go just to churn money and recycle it to the right people, and it's not us. Making power isn't the objective.
After 6 years now and going through all this, the main driver behind this is we've discovered is money. It's purely money. A small number of people are going to make a huge amount of money out of it.
That's happened with renewable energy. It's now become an avenue for big business to be pursuing profits because it is such a profitable business these days.
It's not about generating power. It certainly isn't about providing affordable, reliable power to Australian citizens, which is what the energy grid always did.
You know, every time we ask the question about why are we doing this, it's just because we have to. And I think there's so much money tied up in all of this renewable energy stuff, so many government schemes and subsidies that we're being had.
The reality is it's actually driven by a complicated system of subsidisation. A good subsidy is when you subsidise me, and a bad subsidy is when I subsidise you. The problem is that once we get to the point where everyone is subsidising everyone, then guess what? No one is subsidising anyone, it's all just cost. And that's what's appearing on our electricity bills. We're building more and more generation that is dependent on the weather, the vagaries of the weather, the wind and the sun. The problem is that the wind farm and the solar farm can't do what the old plants did. They can push energy out, but they can't provide that full set of technical services. And so you increase volatility, you make it harder and harder and harder to balance the generation and the load. And then you drive up costs, trying to keep that system in balance at all times. The optimal mix or the optimal balance of generation in the system is not very dissimilar to the level that we're already at now. But if you try to push that share of wind and solar in the system to very, very high levels, up to and approaching 100%, the costs just escalate very dramatically. It's not a straight line. The costs go up steeper and steeper and steeper. The drivers to dial up the share of renewables in the system ultimately comes from legislation from the Parliament that requires certain targets to be met. And that, through this complicated system, ends up with higher and higher costs. Those costs flow through to even higher prices, and those prices end up on everyone's electricity bills.
Energy bills have gone up, they have not gone down. And when you look into the data, the reason for this is we've got the closure of the baseload power supplies. Now, baseload power means it operates 24/7, 365 days a year, rain, hail or shine. Now, you get that from coal-fired power. You cannot get that from wind or solar. Sure, when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, it will operate and it can operate okay. But in terms of powering an industrial economy like Australia's, it cannot get the job done. And at a mass scale, it is experimental. We've looked into this from an economic-wide perspective, and yes, on your rooftop, it can generate good power source, but when you're talking about a manufacturing industrial-based economy, it just cannot get the job done. One of the big issues is so much of this money for the industrial renewables goes overseas. All you have to do is look at China, which is the dominant power when it comes to the exportation of solar panels and wind turbines. For example, China exports 90% of the solar panels that we receive in Australia. Now, this is a huge national security risk, as well as being a real economic problem. If we keep going down this path, energy bills will keep going up. Renewables are not the cheapest form of energy, they're the most expensive form of energy. Yes, the sun is free, yes, the wind is free, but the wind turbines are not free, the solar panels are not free, and the transmission lines and the transmission towers are not free. So you have to factor those costs in. What our analysis has established is if we keep going down this path, electricity bills will quadruple by the end of the decade as we take the coal-fired power stations offline.
So it's in everyone's best interest to take a big pause, take a stop, big breath, and let's get this right. Because at the moment, it is just chaotic madness. And everyone is suffering. Regional communities, our precious biodiversity, our energy security, and at the end of the day, power prices can never go down when you start considering the number of turbines that we need. So for example, we've mapped 21,000 turbines in Australia. Now, each turbine costs around $22 million to $28 million to construct. Now, if you correlate that over 21,000 turbines, we're looking at over $500 billion in capital costs just for turbines. That excludes all the transmission, 28,000 kilometres of transmission, the pumped hydros, the fleet of BESS battery systems, which are very short-lived, 8 to 12 years. Throw them in the bin, replace them. Then we need millions and millions of hectares of solar. And then I've got to laugh because it's so crazy. And then you need a fleet of brand new gas plants to back it all up when none of it works. So we're going to need 14 gigawatts of brand new gas plants just in this state of Queensland as a backup to keep the lights on in summer when this doesn't work. This is the insanity of it. So we're looking at around 1.5 trillion to meet those 2030 targets, which falls in line with what the Net Zero report has published.
This pursuit of a target, an arbitrary, high renewables or 100% renewables target, I think it's a dead end. I think we're going up a dry creek bed, and we'll get to a certain point and everyone will realise it was a mistake. And the risk is we're trapped. The risk is that we build a system that's a perpetual recession machine, and it's very hard to reverse out of that dry creek bed and then get on a better track.
It destroys the whole country. I mean, it builds in these high costs and an inefficient system and all this wreckage that our children and grandchildren are going to have to fix. And it does nothing positive for the future of the country. So it's not just this microcosm of me or us, it's the whole thing.
I feel so strongly about protecting my home and my community that I had to stand up and take some action and push back against all of this stuff, because we are literally being steamrolled in rural and regional New South Wales. And it's all in the name of, the greater good or the public interest. Well, where are we in the public interest? Why don't we get a say within the public interest?
If we don't come out and fight for it, we can't face our kids.
Close friends are definitely not keen at all on them, but they just were like, what's the point? What can we actually do?
That's where I felt right at the beginning. And it's just amazing how you speak to just a couple of friends and, they're like, yep, I'm on board with you. I'm on board with you. And that's just enough to power you through to, stand up for what you believe in. Yep.
What does it mean if we stay on this path? Frantically chasing a 100% renewables dream. I think what it means is that everyone's bills will keep going up and up and up, and the increases will be steeper and steeper and steeper. That's on our home electricity bills. And at the same time, all the businesses that we buy from, starting with the supermarkets and then through all the other businesses, their electricity bills will also be going up and up and up. And so I cannot see how we can solve the near-term cost of living crisis if we stay on this energy policy pathway that we're on. We'll just have permanent inflation, I believe. And we'll see businesses close, we'll see the hit to unemployment, and all these things is just a very dangerous spiral.
So why do we have to waste all this money and effort and destroy people's lives, the local environment, and probably the world environment if you're worried about emissions, by producing this stuff that doesn't work? Why don't we do something that's sensible? People in the country will get behind projects that are sensible and work. They won't get behind stupid stuff. And this is stupid. This stuff should never have reached the light of day. We shouldn't be having this discussion. You know, you should be off working, I should be off doing something productive as well. And for some reason, we're all here spending time discussing this fantasy world stuff that the bureaucrats and the politicians keep throwing at us. And I mean, the whole thing's got to stop.
Why is the rush so important at such a huge cost to rural Australia? I support localisation of energy generation projects on all different types, renewable energy included, but I do not support a rapid rollout that wipes out our countryside, our landscapes and divides our communities. It's not what the future of rural Australia should look like.
This is the most dramatic economic transformation our nation has faced in the modern era, and we have 8 years, just over 90 months to do it. That means we have to be all in, and we are. We're determined to get on with it. We have not a second now to waste, and nor do we intend to. Nor do we intend to. Nor do we intend to.
Come out of the city and have a look at the results of Chris Bowen's policies on the towns, on the fertile food producing land, on the people, on the wildlife, on the limited, lush, biodiverse areas that we have, because he is the one that is pushing for this, that is rushing it through in a reckless way, that is waiving all the rules to allow this to be unrolled in a reckless and incredibly dangerous fashion that the future generations are going to be paying for pretty much forever.
Authorised by Sandra Burke, Advance Australia, Canberra.